Good morning. My name is Charlie Moss, and I have the honor of being your community and well-being prefect this year. It is my hope that we can continue to create a community that we can all be proud of and one that celebrates the special gifts each one of us brings to Appleby. Appleby is an incredible place filled with incredible people, but we all know that. What I will be speaking about today is something that is a little more complex. But before I do, I'd like to ask you a question. What does it mean to be strong? You could point out the obvious and say that to be strong is to be physically fit, able to move heavy objects without toil. While physical strength is extremely admirable, I want to focus on a different type of strength. What does it mean to be emotionally strong? Something as subjective as emotional strength may not have a set answer. To be emotionally strong, you could be able to recognize different emotions and accurately depict how you are feeling. You could have integrity, sticking to your guns and your personal beliefs of right and wrong. You could be respectful, demonstrating tolerance and a willingness to learn about differing viewpoints. These are clearly admirable traits, and being described as any of these traits are testaments to your character. But there's one trait of emotional strength that I believe cannot be taught. Rather, this trait must be learned through experience. Before I discuss this trait, I'd like to share a story with you. About a year ago, I was introduced to my now favorite board game called Settlers of Catan. The point of the game is to use collected resources to build the best civilization. As a huge board game fan, I tend to do well in board games, and I was confident that I would win my first game of Catan. That hopeful thought was quickly destroyed when I proceeded to lose horribly. After that, I, being the ever-competitive board game player I am, studied up in hopes that my loss was simply a lack of experience. When my second game of Catan began, I was off to an acceptable start, but was unable to capitalize on my strategy, leading to another miserable defeat. Now, at this point in the speech, other speeches may switch to the fairy tale ending, where I learned that hard work pays off and end up winning and mastering this board game. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I just kept losing and losing, unable to outwit the competition, no matter how hard I tried. Now, I want to pivot and ask you to think of a time when you found success. You likely felt some mix of happiness, pride, or confidence that is hard to beat. So many people strive to be successful, and why shouldn't they? It's a great feeling to be proud of yourself and your accomplishments. To succeed is to win, and who doesn't like winning? When you find success, you'll likely feel proud of yourself. Maybe you'll receive a few compliments or pats on the back, but that may be it. There may not be any lessons to be learned. Sure, on your quest to get a great grade on a test, be Employee of the Month, or in my case, win at a board game, you might overcome a few obstacles, but obstacles are often faced by everyone. It's important to understand that the greatest stories are not of those who achieve countless successes, but of those who stay strong after countless defeats. This is the trait of resilience, and resilience is learned through experience. I am sure we have all experienced success in our lives, but true failure may be a relatively new concept to each of us. Before arriving at Appleby, you may have attended a smaller school in a different part of the province, country, or world and stood out amongst your peers there. You may have been told that you have great potential and are destined for great things in this world. Small setbacks may have happened to us here and there. In my case, it was me not getting the role of Olaf in my grade 5 Frozen musical, but I moved on. When arriving at Appleby, your grade size may have tripled or quadrupled, and with all of these truly special students at Appleby, you may have had, and may be currently experiencing, self-doubt and a feeling that you are not as special as everyone else. I was fearful of failure, and during my time at Appleby, I experienced true failure for the first time in my life. I realized quickly that there can be a lot of pressure placed upon us as students to be great and to do great things, and this pressure can be from external sources or internally within us. We may end up placing more importance on certain things than they deserve. We may infer that greatness is achieving a certain goal, and if we do not achieve that goal, we are not great, and sadly, this may affect our self-worth. I certainly have fallen victim to this mentality in the past, spending way too much time focusing on greatness and my fear of failure, which led me to be resentful of some people I used to idolize. The pressure to be great can mold us into diamonds, but there are many times when we crack and get pressed into coal instead. In hindsight, it's comical to think that the solutions to our problems is failure, but I adamantly believe that accepting yourself and your failures will yield impressive results for your emotional strength and, more broadly, you as a person. When it came to dealing with failure, I needed to face it head on and switch from seeing failure as, well, a failure, and more so as a teacher. Don't get me wrong, I obviously feel disappointed and frustrated when things do not work out like the way I'd hoped for, but the key when I am frustrated is to see the forest through the trees. Instead of focusing on a loss and stressing about what this one instance of failure means for their entire lives, truly resilient people can take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Much like a game of Catan, our life is more chance than we would sometimes like to admit. Life really is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we react to it, so learning to get up after we get pushed down is both humbling yet necessary for our characters and emotional strength. Resilience differs from principle-based teachings like honesty and respect, where those lessons are taught to us and we're expected to follow a rigid set of social expectations. Resilience is experience-based. A comparison could be drawn between resilience and a sport in that the only way to get better at that sport is to practice it. But that now begs the question, how do we practice failure so that we can learn to be resilient? The answer is easy, and it's to try something new. I found that stagnancy in life means I have nothing to teach myself, and I'm boxing myself in. Sure, the comfort zone sounds appealing, but if you truly want to be emotionally strong, challenging yourself is the surefire way for personal growth. In my case, it was a new board game that instilled in me these valuable lessons. However, resilience, much like many other emotion-based principles, does not result from a one-size-fits-all experience or lesson. In fact, lessons about resilience can come from anywhere. A formative memory for me is being late to church with my family years ago and having to awkwardly shuffle to our seats. In that moment, I learned a valuable lesson about punctuality instead of just letting the awkwardness get to me. And look at me now. I believe that if I'm not early, I'm late. Another way to acclimate to failure is to set goals that will challenge you and that you may not be able to accomplish. That way, if you do fail, you will learn new lessons along the way that may help you achieve other goals in the future and to grow as a person. Those who rarely fail sometimes lack the humility and clarity to see what really matters. I've learned after so much time spent striving to be great that my definition of success should not come solely from my achievements and accomplishments, but from how I respond to my failures and model that response for others. I like to use my own, albeit colloquial phrase of when in doubt, thug it out, to describe how I know I can power through what needs to be done. I know now that the lessons I learned from my failures and my resilience should be used not only to make myself stronger and my own life better, but to make the lives of others better as well. Now, by no means am I trying to promote the message that we should become complacent with setbacks. I still strive to be as successful as I can be, but I know it is normal to feel a sense of disappointment after failing at something. I'm only human, and disappointment is a fact of life. The important thing is that instead of letting failures get to me, I learned to roll with the punches and to be grateful for each success, no matter how big or how small. The little things that made me feel happy and proud of myself are so incredibly important in life, and you should celebrate yours too. This helps us all to be our true selves, and being your true self shines brighter than any light you try to force. I'll tell you right now that some people cannot fathom being accepting of failure. Some may call you weak if you fail, and some may consider me weak for the message I'm trying to convey. But trust me, when the going gets tough, I get going. Resilience has taught me to tough out any challenge that comes my way. I'm not the strongest, I'm not the most skilled, and I don't have the wisdom of a sage, but I work hard to be reliable, helpful, and a positive force in my community, and there is strength in that. If you remember one thing from this speech, I hope it is the fact that life is not fair. I'm sure you will experience the shining glow of victory, but I am positive you will also feel the crushing blows of defeat. To think of oneself as infallible or incapable of error is as naive as it is vain. But to wallow in your defeats and lose sight of what truly makes you special and successful is a much greater sin. I want each of you to understand that our defeats are the perfect times to teach us about our weaknesses and teach us to be emotionally stronger. No one is the best at everything, and that's okay. Unfortunately, I'm still bad at Catan to this day, but I've realized that every time I lose, I get the chance to think about how I can improve. If you want to be the best person you can be, fail. Fail so you can learn for next time. Fail to make victory taste all that sweeter. Take pride in your losses, Appleby, because at the end of the day, it does not matter how much success or failure we have in our lives. The only thing that matters is if we have the grit and the resilience to find joy in every moment. We need to lead lives worth living, but in doing so, we need to be resilient and rise above every failure we experience. After all, the longer the tunnel, the brighter the light at the end. To own today is to overcome whatever happens to you, failures included. Be proud when times are well, but be strong when times are tough. And remember, like I said before, when in doubt, thug it out. Now, I talked a lot about challenge and rising to the occasion, so why don't we rise to the occasion and sing the Trees of the Fields, hymn number 662.